Okay, excellent. So we're now live on BVI Pilots and Blind Flight Simmer channels. So welcome along everyone to the next BVI Pilots podcast. As is normally the case, I'm here with John and Andy, with Marshall dealing with tech and editing. Hey Andy and John, how's it going?
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, not bad. Glad to be here with everybody.
I think it's been a while.
I think it has been a little while, yeah. Um, but we thought
Yeah, I
we'd
was trying
do
to
one
think what the last one was, but it's
probably
been.
last year.
I think it was the event, wasn't it? Wasn't there an event?
I think
Maybe we
it
did one
might,
after that too. I can't remember, but yeah, it's been a while.
at least November, I think.
Yeah, so the main reason we decided to do one now is because TFM has moved on to the 747 after completing the 737 plans and has also recently got a weather center feature which is going to come out in the next preview, and it's quite a big feature, so we thought we'd talk about it and let you guys ask any questions before it releases. So yeah, I don't really have any questions on a list per se, so I guess we'll just open it up to Andy, and if you could just tell us a bit about what the Weather Center feature is and how it's came about.
So the Weather Center is um, a window in TFM that you can use right bracket Control W to open. Now keep in mind this will be in the next preview, not the current preview. You can open it with right bracket Control W, and inside this window you have three main sections. You have wind, clouds, and temperature. And so this weather feature gets the weather that is surrounding your aircraft at the current location. So we'll talk about wind. Wind, it can come in anywhere between 0 and 13 layers of the atmosphere. It just depends on what part of the world you're in. It also depends on uh, all of the wind that's going on. Uh, the heavier it is and the more it spreads in directions, the more layers there are. And so they go up from surface level anywhere between 20 feet and can extend all the way to 60,000 feet because, in general points, you're never going to have an aircraft above 60,000 feet for most practical purposes. So the wind, each layer has things like direction, speed, gust, visibility, your wind shear, your turbulence level. There might be a couple more, but that's the main point of the weather as far as the wind goes. Now, what this will do is it will let you be able to determine at your current position if there's better wind conditions than where you're at right now. And if there is, then you can either request ATC give you that altitude, or you can just go up or down to that altitude if you're flying offline. Along with that comes with right bracket I, which most people using TFM is fairly familiar with, and this is the snapshot report of the wind at your current altitude and your current position. Previously, it would give you the direction, the speed, and the gust. Now it'll give you everything: direction, speed, gust, visibility, um, wind shear, and turbulence. And it's also customizable now, so you can go to TFM settings, navigate to weather, expand it, go to the weather wind command output, and you tab through the settings and you check the box for the things you want TFM to tell you when you press right bracket I, and uncheck the things you don't want it to tell you when you do
For
right bracket I.
for example, I not to interrupt you, Andy, I was just gonna tell real quick.
No, you're good.
I went in and changed my settings so when I hit right bracket I get direction, speed, visibility, um, wind gust, and then shear, like what it is. It might be gradual, it might be I forget the different ones it said, but very
Yeah.
minimal. So it's nice that you can customize that to your liking because I figure when I hit that, it's giving me information on my where I'm at. So I went in and took away the upper altitude that it gives you because
Yeah, because in most cases, it's not really necessary because you can always go look in the weather center to see what's going on.
I guess unless
But
you're
there,
flying through a storm, you could turn it on maybe. I guess that could be helpful.
yeah,
I don't know, but
there are some people who might want it, so it's
yeah.
there for people who want to turn it on or turn it off. And moving on to the next one, you will have temperatures. And this is the same type of idea with temperatures as it is with wind. There could be anywhere from 1 to 13 layers of temperatures throughout the atmosphere. And at this point, it will give you the daytime temperature for each layer, and it will give you the nighttime variant for the temperature. It also give you the dew point in case you need to know that for icing conditions or whatever.
What was the hotkey for that again, Andy? Was it right bracket, shift O, or am I thinking of something else?
Um, what is what
For
is you're looking?
the hotkey for the wind.
It's right bracket I. It's what it always was.
Oh, it's just right bracket. Okay, never
Yeah,
mind.
it's the same thing it always.
I was thinking of the
Yeah,
shift O like we had before, and then you changed it. Never mind. Okay.
yeah. So Windows right bracket I. It's what it always has been. It's just customizable now.
Yeah.
And then the next thing we have is clouds. Now this is a thing that uh, it's I wouldn't say difficult, but it takes some form of work to get done. Um, so if you go to the cloud section of Weather Center, you're going to have here again some more layers, and it could go anywhere from 0 to 6, because usually clouds are not beyond 60,000 feet. um, so with clouds, they're cloud layers, so they're basically bundles of clouds that spread over a certain distance. And Weather Center will give you how tall they are. So it'll start with the lower altitude, give you the upper altitude. Subtracting the two will tell you how tall they are. It will give you the current icing conditions. It'll give you the precipitation, whether it's rain, snow, sleet, hail. Uh, it'll give you the rate if there is any precipitation, like very low to very high. Uh, it gives you turbulence, all that good stuff. Um, Now, the nice thing with clouds is a new feature, and the hotkey is right bracket shift O. The right bracket shift O, and it's cloud command output.
That's what I was
It
talking
does,
about.
yeah. So what it does is it does the same thing for wind that the wind does, but it does it for the clouds. So there's a little bit of a difference though, because it's highly dynamic. So if you're not inside of a cloud, it will tell you not in cloud. And it will report if there's any clouds directly above you and how far away they are, and if there's any directly below you and how far they are. For an example, you might hear no clouds above, or you might hear cloud 5,000 feet above,
Like
or no
sitting here, I
clouds
did.
below. Yeah, you may have no clouds below, or it might say cloud 15,000 feet below.
Yeah, I
Um,
just did it and
and
it
if you're
said
in,
14,856 above.
yep.
But
And if you are inside of a cloud, then the whole entire setup for right bracket shift out changes. Now it will say that you're in a cloud. It'll give you the type and coverage level, turbulence, precipitation, icing conditions. It'll also tell you how far away you are from the top of the cloud layer, and it will tell you how far the bottom of the layer is from you. So, for an example, you're inside of a cloud. It might say top 500 feet, bottom 200 feet. So you can decide if you need to boogie out of that little cloud segment, you can figure out what the fastest way out is. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, and this is also customizable to fit whatever people want to see and hear. Uh, TFM settings, go to weather, go to cloud command output, and you can check the boxes of things you want to hear, uncheck the boxes of things you don't want to hear. And the new wind and the new cloud command output settings will persist through restarts. So you don't have to keep going in there every time and changing it. Um, the next thing that comes along with Weather Center, I guess, is a highly coveted feature now. It's called cloud tracking. And turn it on or turn it off. You press right bracket Control O to toggle it on and off. So when it's on, TFM will tell you when you've entered a cloud and when you've left a cloud. And in settings, if you go to weather and then automatic announcements, you can check the box if you want SAPI 5 to read it, or uncheck the box if you want your screen reader to read it to you. So if you don't want it on, then you just don't turn it on because it's turned off by default. If you want it on and you're just starting your flight, right bracket Control O, flight cloud tracking on, and then it will start telling you about your clouds. And that's pretty much the summary of what we have so far.
All right, thanks. So that was great. You preempted most of my questions there, and I mean, I have to say, this feature is really going to be helpful in determining what sort of weather you should not be flying through. And if you see some cumulus cloud, you see some icing, precipitation, maybe you want to whack that anti-ice on. Maybe you want to look at amending your altitude. Um, So I know the question's going to come, so we'll get it out of the way. Could you give us a rundown of what add-ons this works with in terms of weather injection, and whether there is a way, even with Rex, to get it to work in Microsoft 2020?
Okay, so first of all, I'll deal with the 2020 issue. I do not believe it will work with 2020 because they're not exposing their weather API to anyone that I'm aware of. So using the weather center and all that stuff in 2020 at this point is out of the question. Uh, for the other stuff in P3D 4 and 5, it works with the Orbex scenery weather. It works with the default simulator weather engine, active sky, Rex weather, real weather. That's the things that it's been tested against so far. From my conclusion on that is, as long as the weather engine or add-on you use injects weather and clouds into the sim, then this will pick it up without a problem.
So, if if you don't mind me interrupting, that I actually just thought of something. I've been just in the background. Um, so obviously you've mentioned that it probably isn't going to work with 2020, does that mean that it will revert back to the old way of picking weather up if you've got 2020 loaded and what have you, or will it cause issues where, a future TFM update that has the weather center in it may not be able to be used with 2020 until this issue is either resolved or something like that?
So cloud tracking, cloud command output, wind command output, the weather center, all of that stuff will not be
Sorry, Raj.
usable. And at this point, there's no way to revert back to where it was before.
Mm.
Okay, well,
So,
I guess that's a thing to note.
Okay, so should
yeah.
2020 users be able to use things like right bracket I still, or are they going to get errors?
No, it's gonna cause them issues.
Right, okay, good. So a
What
note
You
for
about
know, at
2020
even
users.
at
the now? What about the
yeah,
right bracket
at
O, like we normally would do in
right,
2020?
It's all gone, I think.
yeah, right bracket L is temperature, so whatever TFM used to do in the past, it'll still do that, but
Oh, okay, okay.
the
So they
revised
can still
wind,
get temperature, but just nothing else.
yeah, right. So the revised wind command, the new cloud tracking, weather center, cloud command output, that will not work.
Right, got you. And the win command in 2020, is that something you will consider looking into fixing so that 2020 users can still get access to wins even if it's the old way?
Yes, we will deal with that and have something in there for that.
Got you, excellent. Just for those 2020 users out there, I'm sure they're wondering this. And I'll tell you what, let's. I think unless you've got anything else about the current features to mention, Andy, I was going to ask if you could talk a little bit about the future concepts related to it. So the idea of 3D cloud modeling.
Yes, so things we're looking into, it's a little bit of a research project that I'm going to be starting at some point. And we already have the 2D clouds, so we can tell how tall they are and what altitude they start and stop. One of the things that I figured out while testing is if you're flying level through a cloud, TFM will tell you when it leaves that particular cloud. And if you're flying level and you enter into that another cloud, it will actually tell you that. So it brought up the idea of 3D clouds. So in a real airplane, you usually, with your weather radar, you're going to set a limit on how far out it's going to probe for things. And so TFM could very well do that, say 10, 20, 30, 40 miles out, whatever. And whatever it sees in front of it, that distance out, it could tell you, say, for an example, you have a bank of clouds coming up in 30 miles. Or if you're inside of a cloud, it could say, hey, this cloud, you're going to leave this cloud in about 50 miles given your current trajectory. And so, given that, we can say, check to see how far it is from the nose of your plane and see what the borders of the cloud is from each of the wingtips. Uh, that way we would have 3D clouds. Might not come right away because we do have to get back to other things like the 47 has been put off for this weather center, and we have some other ideas in mind for mapping, but we can get into that when that stuff comes closer.
All very nice. Okay, does anyone else have any other comments on the weather center, ways in which they've found it useful, or things they might have heard that they want to comment on?
I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
uh, I've been flying with it for a little while, and because where me and Andy does, the sneak peeks, and we did one on it, and it's been pretty useful. I've been able to at least, see what's going on around me, and I just like that idea, that when there is a bad storm, we can look at it now and kind of see what to expect instead of just getting a sudden surprise. But other than that, I mean, I think it's good, and I'm glad to see that we've got the weather. Go ahead, Marshall. Sorry about that, buddy.
No, it's alright. Um, yeah, I haven't used it personally, but from what I've just heard then and from what I've heard being talked about, it definitely sounds like it's going to be a helpful feature in the future when it does release. Yeah, it's definitely going to be helpful to be able to see where clouds are, get more details about the turbulence and what have you. I want to kind of try that out at some point and see what details when we get into situations, what details we can pick up and what have you, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously that stuff would more than likely obviously be available to a degree in the PMDG itself, which obviously we couldn't pull it from, but to have it in TFM is going to be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I want to make a note of is, well, a couple of things actually. The first thing is the Weather Center will have a customizable refresh rate. So if you go to Weather and tab through that window, it will have a setting that will let you define how many minutes it will auto refresh. So if you say you set it to 10, then every 10 minutes that TFM is running, it will refresh the Weather Center. Um, there's also refresh buttons on each one of the panels that it has in case you want to manually check again before the 10-minute time frame is up. The title bar of the Weather Center window will have the timestamp of the last successful refresh, auto refresh. It won't consider manual refreshes. That way,
Mm-hmm.
if you need to keep a time on it, then you can always keep a time on it. The other thing that brought it to my attention is when Marshall mentioned PMDG stuff. The Weather Center will be available for everyone. It's not just for P3D. So if you're still using FS Tramp or some other autopilot add-on to fly freeware planes or the older like Cessnas and stuff like that,
Mm.
you will have full access to the Weather Center.
Yeah. No, I'll just backtrack there because I could probably be a bit clearer. What I meant is in an aircraft as detailed as the PMDG, you'd obviously have kind of a visual display in front of you. I would imagine that has all this information on, so to be able to have access to it in TFM is going to be great. That's what I meant. I guessed it would be usable to everyone. Otherwise, what's
Yeah, no,
yeah.
no, you just reminded me to mention something about it, that's all.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that even the PMDG in 2020 does not yet have a weather radar. In fact, there's no plane that does. So if anyone's thinking, this is a TFM thing that 2020 doesn't have, it's an API thing from Microsoft's side that all developers are having issues with at the moment, and it is something that they're looking to resolve. So hopefully in the future.
Yeah.
Right. I tell you what we'll do. I was going to go on to the 747, but I realized we didn't probably finish talking about the 737 since the last one was quite a few months ago. I mean, I won't talk about everything because we'll be here all day, but I guess I'd be kind of curious, Andy, from your perspective, doing the 73 all this time. What were some of the biggest like challenges, and maybe did it turn out the way you expected, or was there some surprises along the way?
Well, I wouldn't say there were like any super huge surprises along the way. Some of the challenges that we've had along the way were some controls have multiple values, and like for settings and things like that, and trying to figure out what settings they are, what they're called, and what their internal values are, because PMDG did not put them in their SDK. So it's like a guesswork type of thing. Some things in the SDK were mislabeled. So, for an example, a simple one, the battery on-off switch. It had in the SDK, they said there were three options. You had on battery or off, and it's not true. It's on or off. Battery was the actual label that was on the airplane's panel itself. So um, those were a lot of the things that we had issues with. Um, some of the other things as we went along with that, uh, you have a learning process, and as you go along, you change your idea on things that would make it easier. For an example, instead of drop downs with three or four choices, can you have a button that will just toggle between them all? Like cycle them through. One of those examples is the bank limiter and the MCP. If you do left bracket shift F, find the bank limiter. You press the button to cycle up through all of the settings, which is a lot easier to do than, say, a drop-down box. Uh, for as far as the source code and all that stuff goes, it doesn't take as much. So there may be some inconsistencies with some of that stuff as you go down, in the tree view. It's easy to see what we've done over time, because if you go to the panels window and start at the top, that's when we first started. All the way down through the bottom of the tree view is where we stopped. That bottom of the tree view is the most recent things that we've done. And so if you go look through those, you can see some improvements in design, or inconsistencies as some people would call it. Part of it's because the SDK forces us to do things like that. Other part of it, you learn what's better and what's faster and what might be simpler for your users to use. And so uh, I think that's pretty much, aside from that, it's learning what these things are and what they do and how they work, because how can you build, in a sense, we'll put it this way, how can you build an airplane if you don't know what it's supposed to do or how it works? And so how can we build an accessibility layer over an airplane if we don't know what it does and how it works? So I think that's a larger part of the challenge too, is figuring out and understanding how a lot of this stuff works, especially if it's visual.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this, here's that. They point here, they point there. Or if it's like the Boeing technical site, uh, they're decent on their descriptions of things, but they'll show you screenshots of the panel, and they'll say the area highlighted in the red box. It's like, well, that doesn't help me. Yeah. Here,
Yeah.
here's the DC panel. Here's the DC controls. It's highlighted in red. It's like, that doesn't help me any.
Well, and from
So,
the other side of it, going through it from the beginning till now, like all the sneak peeks that me and Andy did, so I kind of got to watch it grow, and you learn a lot. Like that tree view just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and I can say that starting out, even with as much as I've flown the 7.3, I still don't have it all memorized. Like there's a lot in there, and you just got to go in and you're just going to take your time to learn all them areas, because there is a lot. But I mean, it looks good. It's not. You remember it used to be you arrow down, it'd be slow. Now you just go right on down. There's no lag as you going as you're going through the menus or anything. It's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, and I'd have to say, to be honest, some parts of it were just mundane, boring stuff. Other parts of it were you can't wait to see how it's going to turn out, or things turn out better than they expected, and it's like, oh,
Mm.
really? You got to be kidding. And so I think it was a hodgepodge full of things.
Yeah, but I guess for you, it's probably gave you a really good technical knowledge of the 737 because there's all these switches that, are in there and you think, what the hell does that do? And when am I ever going to use that? But then you have
Yeah,
to
it's like, what
figure it
the
out.
hell? Where did that come from? Yeah, yeah. And then you go try to hunt the thing down, and it's like, okay. So like one good, I kind of freaked out once, and it was towards the beginning. And I was working on the IRU panel, and so I get the IRU panel done. I get all of the offsets inside the airplane. Turn on TFM to see if the stuff works, because you got to test it. And I flipped the left and right IRU to a line, and all of a sudden the left and right IRU light just on off on off on off on off, and it would not stop. And it's like, okay, what the hell is going on? Why is it doing this? So of course I'm not sure what's going on, and the FCOM for the 37 is kind of muddled and difficult to read anyway. So I typed this into Google. 737 IRU lights blinking. And I got a result that says if your IRU lights are blinking, it means the FMC is requesting the GPS coordinates of your current location. Once you put them into the FMC, flip the IRU left and right switches to nav. Like, oh, okay. So what I do, I put it in. I went and put in the current GPS coordinates for where I was sitting at, and flipped the left and right RRUs to nav, and sure enough, they stopped blinking. So yeah, that was a learning experience with that one. And the other ones too were the auto throttle and autopilot amber and red disengage lights. Uh, at this point, until we can get the autopilot and the auto throttle disengage switches in the MCP boxes, then we've been telling people just go into the forward panel and uncheck all 8 of those. Once we get the switches in there to deal with that, then you won't have to deal with it for very long. So yeah, that's learning experiences, technical stuff, and it's like I don't need to know all of this stuff. I don't need to know. So like the 47, I was looking at something because I was trying to figure out, okay, what does what are the generator field reset switches? And it's like all I needed was a basic description of what they were and what they did. Saw this 35-minute YouTube channel video that went into the whole technical detail of what they were, how they worked, why they worked, and he even was showing schematics and diagrams and flow charts, and it's like, oh, he went into the airplane. This is a real pilot. Went into a real cockpit, and he was showing everyone on the electrical display. You can see all of your electrical energy, where it's flowing to, where it's flowing from, and he's like, so let's flip the generator one reset switch to off, and half the airplane loses power. He's like, it's like, dude, I just needed to know that. Don't, that's all I needed. So, yeah, I think that's probably a lot more of the difficult things too. Sitting through these videos, like, okay, I just need to know what they do.
Yeah, a lot of these real world pilots, they're great, but they do go into so much detail. Um, but I guess you're gonna have even more fun with the 747. It's probably got even more technical quirks for you to discover. Um, let's talk about the
Yeah, from what
7.4
I
then.
understand, it's a beast.
Yeah, it sounds like
Yeah.
it, a real classic. So we got the MCP boxes on the 7.4, right? And a couple of other
Yes.
offsets that are reading. So tell us about that.
So basically what we have right now is we have the MCP boxes, you have the speed box, heading box, vertical speed box, altitude box, and what is called the MCP flight controls box, which is left bracket shift F. And that will bring up things like the autopilots and flight directors like it does in the 37. The uh, interesting thing about that is there's not as many things on there as what I thought there would be, because you would think with a larger airplane with more complex things, well, things would be more complex to use. No, MCP is really easy to use. Um, so aside from that, we have the overhead maintenance electrical panel, which is basically your circuit breaker box. You have the overhead fuel, which has two switches on it. One of them is a 2 to 3 transfer switch. And what that basically does is it transfers reserve fuel from engine 2 to engine 3. And you have the scavenge pump, which basically will pull from any available tanks and put them in the least available tanks. So if you got uh, fuel tank 1 that's got 15,000 pounds in it, and you got fuel tank 4 that's got 2,000 pounds of fuel in it, and to make it easy, if you're trying to put fuel from 1 to 4, but you don't have a transfer switch for it, then you can scavenge. And what that will do is it'll try to even out and redistribute all of the fuel tanks so they have enough, as much as equal as possible. And at that point, that's what we have.
Yeah, I mean, I do have to say thank you so much for the MCP boxes in the 7.4. It really makes the workflow a hell of a lot easier.
Oh yeah, and that was the first thing on our mind when we started the 47 is we need to get the MCP boxes out there, because if we don't, and we just go start top to bottom like we did with the 37, you won't get these MCP boxes for, I'm guessing, about a half a year or so.
Mm, yeah, and I just feel personally, I just feel a bit more confident now taking it on VATSIM, especially in high pressure situations. You know, I'm not having to go into the left bracket control P and scroll around for stuff. You know, I can have all three windows side
Yeah.
by side as I want them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I guess now that the weather center feature and the weather tracking features are coming to a close in terms of their first sort of development cycle, it's coming back around to the 7.4. So what is next for the 7.4?
So what's next for the 70 for the 47? Is finishing up the overhead maintenance panel, what's left of it, and then starting the overhead segments. Now, what may be different about the overhead segments for the 47 is there may be just one big, huge conglomerate of an overhead panel, and it may just have all of the panels inside, because finding that users with the 37 are having a difficult time trying to find things. You can't just say overhead. Go into the
Okay.
overhead, go into engines, and there it is. You have to tell them, well, go into the bottom overhead and go to engines, and like, huh, what? So I think that's one of the designs we're going to look into. But next is the overhead, which proves to be very large.
Yeah, I've gotten lost going through that stuff before, like you know, doing some setting, like where's that at again? But you remember the more you do it. But you know, it's all about how often do you go in there and do something.
Yeah.
Okay, and a reminder that the chat is open on both live streams, so if you haven't already, get questions coming in, because we're going to do those questions and we're going to do any other questions that have come through via email and that kind of thing over the past few weeks. So I tell you what, before
There's
we get
nothing in there's nothing in the Blind Flight Summer chat at the moment, as you're probably aware.
yeah, I can see.
Anybody got questions on the BVI side? Go ahead and send them questions this way, and we'll ask them when they come in.
Yeah, get them in. You've probably got 5 minutes or so. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, Andy, before we get to the quick fire questions round?
Yeah, so one thing I want to make mention of, and that comes up in email support quite a bit, and that is we cannot support FS2 crew, especially ground services, reboot, and all of those things, because they don't have an SDK. They embed panels into the sim, which, if they're going to do that, they're just JPG images with click points in them, which likely not any developer for accessibility is going to be able to deal with that very well. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're looking for FS2 Crew products, we can't support them or any of their features.
So someone on my
Aside from that, I
Facebook
don't.
side. Go ahead, Andy.
Aside from that, I don't have anything at this point. Maybe after some questions come in, I might
Somebody
have
on the
some.
Facebook side said, besides the 737, the 74, and the 777, wasn't there another PMDG airplane that you guys have not yet flown or programmed with TFM? I don't know. Is there another plane? I don't know what they're talking about. Is there
So there's
the
yeah,
PMDG?
you have the 37, 47, 77. There's also a DC-6,
That's what they're talking about, I think.
which is really old. It does not have any API for anyone to grab into, so that's
Okay,
out of the
so there's no way to
question.
make that flyable.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
there's absolutely no way.
Yeah, it's also like a 50s airplane or something. It's not going to have anything really in the way of auto systems.
Modern features.
CDU and all that, yeah.
No, no, completely different type of airplane. And that's not to say that we don't want to look at older airplanes, but they've probably, especially for blind pilots, got to have something to help you along the way. And if you've not
I
really got
wonder if
any
they
kind
could
of
fly it with.
systems,
I wonder if they could fly it with the what is that program? The GSX or whatever it is. Not yet. FSX.
FSX Pilot?
Yeah,
yeah,
the
I
one
Probably
program.
not.
oh
No.
yeah, I would be
Yeah, I wouldn't
surprised.
count on it.
This thing has a flight engineer built into it because it's got to be set up in a very specific way. It's not a general plane. You can just hit
Oh, okay.
Control E and fly away. So I wouldn't want to tell anyone to do that and then it not work. So I mean, if
Yeah.
someone wants to try it,
Yeah,
then feel free, but doubt it'll work.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of airplanes, let's have this as the first question. So the 737-900 is coming out on Tuesday in 2020. Will it be compatible with TFM?
And the answer is, as long as they haven't drastically changed anything, yes, it'll be a drop in. So basically, if it worked the way the 38 did, then what you should be able to do is install it into 2020, start it up, and TFM will have an immediate and instant support, other than maybe a couple of tweaks here and there we might have to do.
Okay, excellent, great news. Um, Another thing here about Rex for 2020, I believe we've talked about. Um, but can you confirm that Rex will not work with 2020 and the weather features?
I can't guarantee one way or the other. I haven't tested it, but uh, if it does work, then you should be able to use the Weather Center.
Okay, good to know. And if
I
anyone
guess
does
try
know,
at your own risk.
yeah, try at your own risk. If anyone wants to do it, do
Yeah.
let us know. We'd be very interested. Um, of course, you won't be able to test it now because the preview isn't released. So another question we can segue into. Um, do you have any idea when people can expect to receive the weather features?
Sometime this coming week or the week afterwards. I'm hoping it'll be sometime this coming week. So
Yeah.
tomorrow through Saturday is I'm hoping sometime between then.
Great news.
So that'll be the week commencing the 6th of February at the time of recording.
Mm-hmm.
Now we had a lot of talk about, probably around the time of the last podcast and a little bit afterward, TFM and lag. Um, Now I believe we know what the cause was within our little community, but for the sake of anyone who doesn't, could you talk us through the database and some of the changes that have been made to help with lag in TFM, especially in 2020?
Yeah, okay. So there is a problem where if you were in 2020, the minute you started up TFM, it would start to lag. It would cause audio buffering, video jittering, glitching, jumping around, all that kind of stuff. And so after some testing, we figured out that the database is too large to be loaded all at once. Because if you did, it would push it off to the GPU. It would say, I'm too busy, I can't do this, and there you go. We also found out that every time you would make a request from the database in TFM, it would add an additional database size. So for an example, you load TFM, there's 3 gigs of memory used. You then do right bracket shift C to see what gate you're at. There's 6 gigs of memory used.
Oh wow.
You sit there for a while, you don't remember the gate, you right bracket shift C, there's 9 gigs used. You get to the runway, you hit right bracket shift C. Well, it just keeps stacking up and up and up until all the memory is used and it has to push it off to something else. So that was not a problem in P3D because P3D's database, by the time it's decompressed out of all of the make runways files, is like 100, maybe 300 megs at best. This thing for 2020 was 3 gigs at minimum by the time it loaded everything.
Wow, yeah.
So at one point, there was one time when me and another community member was testing and trying things out. We got TFM to eat up 100 gigs of memory before we had to dump it and say, yeah, well, we know what the problem is. So, uh, as a result of that, we had asked Paul Henty, the guy that made the database features, the library that we use for FSU IPC. We gave him some diagnostic materials and said something needs to be done with this because we can't keep doing this. So he rewrote the database. And the way it works now is it loads the list of airports. When you start TFM, it loads the list of airports. That's all you get. And then you can make requests out of the database. for a particular airport. So a good example is uh, when you set your destination runway in TFM for the ILS setup. You right bracket Control D, the form comes up. You type in the airport you want to land at, you choose the runway that you want to land at, and you press OK. Under the old stuff, that would load an additional 3 gigs because we had to load the entire world. We had to set our location in the entire world, and then pay attention to this little dinky runway out of the whole entire universe. So now we can actually load the runway and only that runway for that particular airport. So instead of this ILS setup taking like 45 gigs of memory, it takes 10 megs of memory. And it's a lot faster. But I don't believe anyone has reported any lag issues after that.
I don't believe so. I mean,
I
it
mean, even my
appears
computer
fixed.
that didn't do so well on 2020, normally even it done better even, and that says something because it just
Yeah,
it was just a struggle, but
Yeah.
yeah,
yeah,
it seems to
and
be doing
people
good
that
now.
were and the people that were reporting issues with cockpit panels being slow and cranky and giving them issues, especially in 2020, I believe most of that's been dealt with too.
My main thing was just stuttering, just where it lagged, like just
Yeah,
stuttering. That's it.
Okay. Another area that we could discuss, and a question I remember I had sent to me via WhatsApp a few weeks back was about the FMC redesign. Could you just talk us through that a little bit and give us maybe an update on how that's going?
yeah. So the redesign has been put on hold for the weather center and a couple other things. We were thinking of having this toolbar at the top of the window and having the scratch pad in the center. That's not going to work for technical reasons, so I think we're going to be moving it to the bottom of the window and having the display fill the top 75 or 90% of the screen. Aside from that, it should work pretty much the same as it does now, except for one major difference, and that would be the scratch pad. Because people's been having problems with the scratch pad with deleting characters or random characters getting punched into the scratch pad in the airplane. So what we're going to do is disconnect the auto typing part, and when you get done typing and getting ready what you want to send to the FMC, then you can press enter in the scratch pad and that will type it in. That way it minimizes less errors and there's less confusion about it.
Okay, so you type it and then hit enter and it submits it basically.
Yeah, so the idea is you would type in whatever you wanted, get it all fixed up if you mistype something, and then you press enter inside the scratch pad and that will type it into the FMC. Because then there's pretty much no errors unless you say typed in KMIA and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't want to do that. And then you could
Yeah.
just go type it in again, whatever it is you needed to type in the first place.
So the TFM, not TFM, but so is that window gonna be larger by the sound of it? You said it's gonna be.
No, it's not going to be bigger. Well, that depends. It's going to take up. It's going to take up 75% or so of the person's screen. So it may be a fairly decent sized window, and the reason why, right now it's got this squirrely font that's like 8 point font. So you have a sighted person with a magnifying glass sitting there trying to read it. And the new one, just like most of the stuff that's in TFM, is going to be Times New Roman 14 points, so it'll be easy
Yeah, because
for
I get
everyone to
viewers and they
read.
try to read, like TFM now, they'll try to read it. And they're like, it's so small. Even sighted people like, it's so small. I'm like, man, there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, well, the newer parts of it are like Times New Roman 14 point, which is by technical accessibility points is large print. So that's
Yeah.
what the FMC is going to be. So it needs a little bit more room.
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Key game questions in chat, and here's another one that we can talk about. Um, we get this question a lot about the A2A airplanes, but now people can actually use the legacy TFM if they download it from GitHub. Is that right?
Yes. Yep, you can use the legacy version. Keep in mind there is no support. We won't fix bugs. We won't add new things. And it's a use at your own risk.
Right, there you go. So if you want to fly the
But
Bonanza, the Cessna 182 Skylane, I think the Cherokee, then they will be the ones you can look at. I have had some people tell me they've tried this out in P2D version 5 and had some issues, whereas version 4 they haven't. Um, but that could well be something that has gone wrong on their system. So bear
Yeah.
that in mind.
And it's a little tricky on the setup, too. Because I've had people email me asking me, I don't remember where all that stuff went. And so, I'm like, I can't really remember enough to tell you how to do it. But when it's all set up right, it's pretty cool. You got a hanger and all that stuff. But
Yeah. So, do we have any questions on your live chat, Johnny?
let me take a look. I don't think we do, but let me look just in case.
Yep. So it's the last chance, guys. If you got
Uh,
questions.
the the planes like the Skylane, can you start those with keystrokes or mouse? It's been a while since I've used that TFM version, Access for All, but I believe there was a script in there and there were set commands that you could use to turn on all the stuff, although I think it was also quite orientated with Golden Cursor when I last did it, but bear in mind that was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I seem to
yeah,
remember
and
we
I
had a
can't
Golden
give
Cursor
support on
profile.
that because
Yeah.
yeah, and I can't give support on it because that was before my time.
Yeah, so no question, but if you guys got them, you need to put them in now because I'm going to be closing up the chat here very shortly.
So yeah, sorry we can't be of more help for you there, Accessible. I believe, yeah, we used a Golden Cursor profile, and I believe there was some kind of A2A configuration manager where you could also set up keys to your joystick for certain things, like the magneto selectors and things
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
there was. Yeah, I remember now. Yeah, there was an A2A configuration manager where
Yeah.
you could set up different things that you could use. You could set up the magneto key or whatever, set it to joystick buttons, and you would
Oh,
need to do
yeah.
that and stuff like that.
I forget, I forget where that's at. I don't even remember.
Yeah, so there is some significant stuff that you'll need to do. You can't really use default simulator hotkeys, like Control E. It may start it up, but may also flood the engine or something like that. So it sounds like you probably know that already, since it's maybe something you're looking into. Right, did we get any questions on yours? Uh, Either that or email, Johnny.
Um, just one here from Rodney on Messenger. Let me read it again here. So are we going to be working on this 7.4 here soon, or are we finishing weather first?
Okay, so we have to finish up the weather center and tidy up a few things, and then it will be back to the 47.
Now,
So
make no
probably
mistake
next
that
week.
you can fly the 7.4 now. The panel, the shit, left bracket shift A, shift S, shift H, all that stuff does work. Just so you know.
Yeah, yeah. It's just you can't deal with other things if you need to manually intervene for whatever reason with first officer, because I know he can be squirrely sometimes, and
One
you
more here.
not like the
Go ahead. I'm
but
just looking while you're.
yeah, no, you can't. You can fly it. It's just you can't intervene if you need to.
Okay, and okay, so the 736. I'm guessing TFM works with that one, being that's a part of the 737, correct? Yeah, I can tell you
Yes.
now. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The 736,
It's
737, 738, 39, and all other variants work
and
with
then Declan. I don't
TFM
know.
as
You
this.
might know how much. Does anyone know how much the 736 is?
Last
736
time
is
I looked, it was still
35.
30. Yeah.
Yeah.
I will tell you, it's a little rocket, man. It takes a little bit getting used to because it's so light. That thing's gone.
Yeah. So if
But
you're short on
yeah,
money,
that's a
that's the one to get.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that's all I got over here.
I believe that's all we got. So, where
Yeah,
can
that's all
people
we've got.
contact you, Andy? And where can they read the blog and download TFM and all that good stuff?
So you can contact us at talkingflightmonitor.com, and I'm sure these links will be in the episode notes. You can get a hold of us at talkingflightmonitor.com. Everything is there. The contact us form is there. Just go to contact. The blog is there. It's in the navigation bar, or you could go to Talking Flight Monitor /blog. Our email is info@talkingflightmonitor.com. Um, you can also find the GitHub repository at Talking Flight. Uh, I'm sorry, github.com/talking-flight-monitor slash talking flight monitor, and that should be the GitHub repository for it.
Mm.
Excellent. And what is the legacy
Um,
version repository? Just while we're here.
That would be github.com/talking-flight-monitor/legacy.
Okay.
it's got dashes in between each word, guys.
Yeah.
Someone I didn't see this. I apologize, Rodney. I installed TFM, and every time I run it, I can't find the window to close it. I
Right
look
bracket
on
can.
system tray and it's not there either, but it says it's running.
Um,
Just
Interesting.
kill it
Okay.
if it's hidden.
So,
Remember
yeah,
Andy, that happened to me
right
and you.
bracket. Well, right bracket Control X will kill it. And it'll say TFM is shutting down. Problem that might be going on while you can't find it in your system tray is by default it's not a commonly used app,
It
so
said it's
you'll
not
have
beeping
to.
when I hit the key. When I hit the keys, it's not beeping to let me shut down. So it's doing the same thing it did to me. Remember, Andy? You're going to have to go to the task manager, and it's probably in
Oh,
there
and kill it.
and kill it, and then just. I think I
Start over.
rebooted too, just to make sure. I can't remember. I think I did.
Yeah, yeah,
I can't
I
remember.
think so.
But go to task manager and just kill it, and then that should fix it. But I can tell you that it's not. It worked. We all have it. I have it. Declan has it. Marshall has it. Everybody has it. We don't. You know, it's good.
In
Yeah,
terms of
sometimes Windows Defender can interfere because it's not a signed app, so it might like grab onto it and hold it hostage for whatever reason, so you just have to go kill it in Task Manager. And once you do that and restart, it should work normal again.
Yeah.
Whenever I run the executable, I get a message about scanning, security scanning. This will take 10 seconds. What is that? That's just a security thing, man. It's nothing to do with the program being bad or it's just a Windows thing, I think.
Yeah, it is, because like I said, it's not signed. We don't have a digital signature on it. And things are expensive.
But just
And
kill it,
so,
reboot, and you should be good. Just
Yeah.
completely, just refresh.
And if you lose it in
yeah,
the system tray, there is a chevron icon usually, and that will expand the tray, and
yep,
then you'll see a whole bunch more applications, usually including TFM. Sometimes the focus likes to
Oh,
jump around, but yeah,
that's what that
so
is. I
if
always
you
wondered what
go
that
to,
chevron was.
yeah, it's a
weird
hidden
name, yeah.
icons thing. So like if you don't have if you have icons up there for apps that aren't commonly accessed, then it will put them in there and hide them out of the way for you. So
Hmm.
a way to fix this is you go in Windows settings. If you go to, uh, I believe it's system tray or the notification tray or whatever, and you can actually tell Windows to keep TFM visible to you at all times in the system tray. That way you're not getting this thing where you don't use it for 2 weeks and then you start it and it hides it because it thinks you don't use it very often. So you can always tell it what to put in the visible part and what not to put in the visible part.
All right, the only other one I got here, let me read it real quick. Whenever I fly the 74 or 777, I don't see all the menus on the main panel like I do the 7. No, that's because the 73 is done and the other two aren't. They're all different. They're all not connected.
Yeah, no, they don't have the same. If you do right bracket, left bracket control P, I mean, to bring up the cockpit panels. In the 37, you're going to see a lot of them because we just got done with most of that uh, late last year, earlier this year.
Yeah.
The 47 and the 77 aren't going to have as many because we haven't started working on the area a lot yet. But as the year goes along, you'll see more stuff coming up in there.
Yep, it's getting there. All right, guys, I'm gonna close this chat here on Facebook. Appreciate the Facebook messages. I know you have to go through Messenger to get to me. I don't know why it don't come through my restream, but anyway, it works. All right, there we go.
As a
Right.
look ahead to things, there are
Yeah.
going to be some new features coming up that most people will like. One of them we're looking into is a look around feature, and the other one is SimBrief import support. So that would be pretty cool.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
spoke about Simbrief on the last podcast. Any timeline on that, or is that going to be alongside the 7.4?
The SimBrief support is going to be a little bit. It's going to be alongside the 47, so there may
Hmm.
be periods of time where we're doing both, where some periods of time SimBrief may get put aside, and there may be times where the 47 gets put aside for a week or two. But our
And yeah, I know
flight
we
plans are
talked.
very large,
I
so
know we talked about
it'll
this
take a
before.
while.
Just curious, is there anything happening with? Because I've had people ask me on my channel, Declan, maybe Declan too, I don't know, but I've been asked about VATSIM a few times that they see the option uh, for VATSIM, or will it, when's that going to be? I don't think we have no estimated time on that, do we? For the
There isn't any
VATSIM.
estimated time frame on that. We think it might be partially to deal with their servers, but we don't know what's going on. So that's going to
I would
take a
just leave it
little
off,
bit
yeah.
of you just leave it off for now, and it'll revert back to its previous how it works, getting all of the stuff out of the sim.
Okay.
Well,
Alrighty.
in terms of how you can contact us, bvipilots.net is probably the best place. We have a contact form, and we also have a recently made 747 tutorial up there, along with our 737 tutorial, which got published over Christmas. Now, this is not a full tutorial, don't get me wrong. PMDG provides hundreds of pages of documentation, so if you're wondering how you want to get into the details of exactly how everything should work, then there's tutorial flights and things like that. But if you want a quick and dirty guide on what you need to do to get the thing set up with First Officer, what flows to run and when, what flight positions to set and when, what keys to hit in the CDU, then this is for you. So we have a 731 and a 747 one. 731 was mainly written by John and edited by me, and then the 747 was mainly written by another member of the community tower and edited by me. Both of them are up there. You can also email me at blindflightsimmer44@gmail.com or comment on any of these streams that we do on the channel and we'll pick it up. And what about you, John, for contacting you specifically?
Uh, yeah, the email that I've been putting, and you just put it in the chat. You guys can send an email to 737flights at gmail.com. That's the one I've been using just for for the channel itself. And then, of course, you've got the info for the podcast. But other than that, just come on, you can ask on chat or you send the email to 737flights at gmail.com.
Excellent, right. Well, I think unless anyone else has got anything else they want to add, that brings us to a close. Is that all good with you, Andy?
Yeah, I don't have anything extra at this point.
Yeah, I think we've came a long ways, and yeah, it's nice to see things moving along. It takes time, but I think a lot's been accomplished. So
Yeah, and we should remind people. I know people always ask when the next podcast is going to be. Problem is, these podcasts, as you can see, take over an hour usually. And if we were to do one of these every couple of weeks, well, we might not have time. Andy might not have time to come on. And there's so much out there already. If you're in all the WhatsApp groups, and we do have a WhatsApp community now that you can find on bvipilots.net, which is great because you can join it through a link and then choose which groups you want to join. For the virtual airline, for the Q&A beginner group, or for the main just BVI pilots group. But either way, if you're in there, you'll see stuff on a daily basis. If you watch mine and John's channels, you'll see sneak peeks from John, and you'll see weekly updates from me. I round everything up. And if you look at the TFM blog, you can see usually weekly blog posts with details on what's been going on. So we don't need a podcast every week, and we don't have time, but they are great for getting an overview and an interview of Andy here and what we've done, you know, over the past few months.
yeah, and again, like we've always said, the podcast is to give you guys information that will always be the same. It won't be, you know, uh, go somewhere else and find out a different story. It's going to be the same. And, a lot of stuff we talk about on the channel, maybe it could change, or maybe there's more information that we didn't know. So we don't put that kind of stuff on the podcast because we're trying to give the podcast that reputation of if you want the facts, go to the podcast. So
Yeah,
keep that in
a good
mind.
example, a quick example of that is what if you, do you remember this, John? If we were to come up here and tell you, oh, well, in order to access this feature, you press this key, and to get this one, you press that key. And then overnight, it's not even the same anymore. It doesn't even look the same. Those keys aren't there anymore. And yeah, you remember that when I put the
Y-
weather center out, you were used to the control
Yeah.
O and the
Yep.
control I. And then all of a sudden, the next day, here's the weather center, Control W. The other two things were taken away, and so yeah, it's not good
And
to.
it's kind of just it's kind of a nuisance because me or Declan or Marshall, we've got to go back in. We've got to either delete the podcast or we got to go in and change the title to let you know that this is not 100% information or it's been changed, and we don't like doing that. It's just something we're trying to keep good integrity for the podcast. So
Yep. So the hotkeys that we talked about in the podcast are permanent. They will be the same now when we talk about them and when this thing comes out in preview. So we can say it's 100% fact.
yeah, but I enjoyed being here with you guys, and appreciate everybody who joined us, watching and listening. So yeah,
Yeah,
thanks
thanks for
for
coming on, Andy,
having me, Declan.
and you, John, and Marshall
Yeah.
for editing and
Yeah,
contributing.
Yeah, yeah.
thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
And this will go.
Yeah, someone asked me about that, um, real quick, Declan. That who does the editing? Well, Marshall does all that, so we give him all the credit for the music, the editing. It, it might not,
If
you
something
might not
goes wrong
think
with the
things
audio,
go,
it's probably my fault.
but there's stuff that goes on behind closed doors, and that's just you do a good job, Marshall. So we appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
We do
thank
edit
you.
these a little bit before they go out. So this will archive as a stream on the YouTubes. It'll get uploaded then as in a slightly edited form to the Spreaker, which automatically then sends it to iTunes, Spotify, Deezer, any podcast platform you could think of, and usually that then is slightly edited to remove any unnecessary technical parts where we were testing or trying to search for things within a live chat. So that's where it'll go, and that's where you'll be able to find it over the next few days when it gets published. So, alright, excellent. Thanks very much, all of you, for coming along and for the questions, and we will see you. Well, we don't know when, but as I've said, you can keep up to date with the community, and I'm sure we'll see you
We got
pretty
college,
soon.
man. We're
Yeah.
all busy people.
Yeah, absolutely. Alright, thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Speak low. Start recording. Check.